Hello and welcome to this video on how to improve your medical college admissions test score. Today we're reviewing an MCAT biology passage on cell signaling. On any MCAT passage, it is important that you first read the initial couple of questions and then skim through their answers. If there's a diagram given, you should also study the diagram first prior to reading the passage. As a tip, anytime when looking at a graph or table, always first identify the X and Y axes and then look at the actual data in the graph. In this passage, we have just a diagram, and you can see that if you use the arrows in the diagram, it'll direct you towards answering the first question. Question 1 asks, what causes adenylate cyclase to become activated? You can see on the diagram that GTP, or guanosine triphosphate, is added to the GS-alpha protein, and at the same time, GDP, or guanosine diphosphate, is removed. From the diagram, you can see that the arrows point to a GS-alpha subunit that appears detached from the beta subunit. You should recognize that this is indicating the GS-alpha subunit is becoming activated, and that you should also see this activated protein is now bound to adenylate cyclase, which also indicates the prior actions of adding GGP activates the protein. You should always read the text after studying a diagram and before setting a final answer. Paragraph 2 of the text also explains that removing GDP and adding GTP activates the alpha protein subunit. This indicates that A is the correct answer to question 1. In your studying for the MCAT, you should be familiar with the adenylate cyclase cascade, but if you are not, the diagram and text still leads you to the correct answer. Question 2 in the passage asks about muscle phosphorylase kinase. In further reading the passage, you can see that paragraph 3 states when this kinase is activated, it breaks down glycogen in the muscle. From general biology, you should know that glycogen is a polysaccharide or polymer glucose stored in both the liver and the muscle, and that breaking down glycogen puts glucose into the blood. Knowing this narrows down the answer choices to B and C. For the MCAT, you're required to memorize key hormones. In this question, you should know that glucagon and insulin are both released from the pancreas, and that while glucagon increases blood sugar levels when they're low, for example, when you've not eaten in a while, insulin decreases blood sugar levels. It's very good to know that insulin does this by directing cells via a different protein cascade to upregulate glucose transporters to bring in more glucose into each cell and out of the blood. This happens, for example, right after a meal when there's excess glucose in the blood. Knowing this gives C as the correct answer to question 2. Question C discusses the phosphoinositide cascade, which you should also be familiar with. As a test strategy, you can see question 3 discusses IP3, and only paragraph 4 mentions IP3 in the text. This is why you should focus on reading paragraph 4 to help you answer question 3. Paragraph 4 states that IP3 causes the release of calcium from the sarcoplasmic reticulum in the smooth muscles. As you may recall from general biology, the sarcoplasmic reticulum is a modified endoplasmic reticulum, and therefore calcium would come out of this modified endoplasmic reticulum and go into the cytosol. This gives C as the correct answer to question 3. Question 4 asks, how does calcium and cyclic AMP activate downstream proteins? From general biology, you may recall that cyclic AMP is the second messenger in the adenylate cyclase cascade, while calcium is the second messenger in the phosphoinositide cascade. You also know that second messengers bind to and activate protein kinases. Specifically, protein kinase A is activated by cyclic AMP in the adenylate cyclase cascade, and protein kinase C is activated by calcium in the phosphoinositide cascade. As you can read, the last paragraph in the passage states calcium and cyclic AMP cause conformational changes in their target proteins. You should automatically associate the phrase conformational change with allosteric change. As you may recall, an allosteric activator binds to a protein at a site that is not the active site, but does cause a conformational change to open or close the active site of that protein. In this case, the second messenger activates the protein kinase by modifying its protein structure to allow the protein's active site to become open. Knowing this leads you to A as the correct answer to question 4. Finally, question 5 asks, what does ACTH or adrenocorticotropic hormone do? The passage does not mention ACTH other than to say it acts via the adenylate cyclase cascade. This question is a good example of how you cannot figure out all the questions on the MCAT just by reading the passages alone, and that you need to have certain facts for the MCAT memorized. In this case, you need to have memorized the major hormones. Specifically, you need to know that ACTH targets the adrenal gland to release aldosterone and cortisol. This makes D the correct choice to question 5. In general, not only should you memorize each major hormone, but you should also know where each one is released, the target of each hormone, and what changes the hormone bring about. For example, ACTH is released by the anterior pituitary, which sits above the hypothalamus in the brain, but above the roof of the mouth. ACTH tells the adrenal gland to release aldosterone and cortisol, and the result is the increase in blood pressure in the body, as well as an increase in glucose in the blood, that are both responses to stress. This concludes our video, and we hope that you have gained a small step forward on your journey to studying for the MCAT. Have a great day.